Good morning, and welcome to another Sandia Mountain Natural History Center quick trip. I didn't join the Army or anything, but I thought in honor of Veterans Day and all the veterans that have served our country, not to mention the veterans that we have as volunteers at the center and even on staff, I thought we'd do today's video using gear that is all military surplus. So throughout the day we're going to be using all military gear. I have, believe it or not, a World War I American mess kit, Vietnam era cup, World War II canteen, and I also have surplus from other countries. This is a British backpack, and we'll see some more as we go on with the hike. But no better way to sort of celebrate veterans who are defending our country than to do a video today about how plants defend themselves against all sorts of things. So thanks for joining us, and let's go learn about plant defenses. So cactus are storing water, or at least they're holding on to moisture, so they're going to be a target for a lot of herbivores, animals that want to come and eat plants and not only get the nutrition from the cactus, but also get food. So one of the most obvious ways that a cactus is defending itself is with these spines. We have both the long spines and these little spines called gloccules, and they are really irritating once they get into your skin. But animals will often figure out ways or just be willing to endure the pain to get that moisture. And we can see that right here. This cactus has actually been eaten out. And we often wondered how that's possible. But what we found when we were doing some bear research with a bear that we had put a radio collar on, and while it was sedated, we looked at its lip, and all inside of its lip were cactus spines. So it just ate it. So I think the animals, they just deal with the spine when they're that desperate for food and water. Another way that plants defend themselves is to simply grow where they're inaccessible to the herbivores. For example, this mullein here is on a cliff, and as we move back, you can see how hard it would be for animals to get to that little bit of mullein. So the yucca has some pretty obvious defenses. These spikes on the end are going to prevent animals from getting into it and eating too much of it. But some of the plants in this family actually have like a poison on the end. The lechuguilla plant that we find in southern New Mexico in the Chihuahuan Desert is another good example. And sometimes the plant defense actually makes a good animal defense. So and we can actually see it here. Animals like mice, squirrels, and smaller animals will go and hide under these yucca plants, and then predators will have a much more difficult time getting to them. So I found here on the ground a plant with a really cool defense, or the plant that nobody really likes. This is actually poison ivy. Shiny leaves of 3, leave it be. Now, obviously here in the fall they're not very shiny, but I'm using my pliers because I am super allergic. But there's an oil on this plant that if you get it on your hands will give you a rash. So poison is another defense that a lot of plants will use to protect themselves from herbivores. So this plant is hops, and hops sort of has, at least I think, I don't know if it's a real defense, 2 defenses. It doesn't smell very good, but I don't know if that would keep an animal away. But one of the more interesting ways that this one defends itself is when we look at the leaves. Now it's fall time, so it's kind of hard to see, but shiny leaves of 3, leave it be. Does that sound familiar? looks very much like poison ivy. So a lot of times plants will defend themselves by the use of what we call mimicry. By looking like a more poisonous or dangerous plant, they deter herbivores, and that's how they defend themselves. So moss is an interesting one because moss, you know, for the most part, moss isn't going to be eaten by herbivores. It's going to be hard for something like a deer to get its teeth in this and rip this off, but insects are going to like this. So moss actually can produce chemical compounds called oxylipins, and those oxylipins actually deter insects and slugs and things like that from eating the moss. So a chemical defense is a new and unusual way that plants can defend themselves. Like on this log here as well. So in honor of Veterans Day, for lunch we're going to have a MRE here. I figure if our veterans sacrificed so much for us that I could sacrifice one day and have a possibly not very good lunch of chicken and rice. So we're going to have some chicken and rice, some nut and raisin mix, oatmeal cookies, tortillas, grape power stick beverage, and oh, at least we got some Smarties in here. So let's see how this goes. Alrighty, see how our chicken and rice came out. Woo, it is hot. This is a chemical heater, so you pour water in. There's a chemical reaction which heats up your food. So then we're gonna open this up. Doesn't smell too good. I wonder if that could be a good plant defense. Let's see. Doesn't really taste all that good either. I wonder if that could be a plant defense. Another interesting defense is smell, believe it or not. And this is valerian. And valerian really smells bad. It smells like old sweaty feet, in my opinion. So that's its defense. And then we can also see this is Oregon grape or mountain mahogany. It has a whole lot of names, but it also has these little spines on it that are going to make it unappetizing to eat. So smell and some more spikes, two more good defenses. So the ponderosa pine tree has one of the most complex defense systems of any of the plants that we've talked about. And what it's defending itself against is insects and stuff, but mainly fire, all right? And it actually really likes fire, so it has a really good defense against it. So the first thing that you might notice is there's no branches down low. So if a fire is coming through, the fire can't climb the tree. So that's defense number one. Defense number two is this bark just flakes right off. So if it does catch on fire, it's like paper and it curls up and it falls off. And then finally, it has very thick bark. And if I take my knife here, another piece of surplus from the German army, made by Swiss Army for the German Army. Did I say Army enough in that little segment? I think so. But if I take my knife and I push it into the tree, we'll find that bark is half an inch to an inch thick. So it's very thick bark. So when a fire does come through, it is protected from the heat by this insulating layer of bark. So ponderosas have a whole bunch of defenses against burning up in a forest fire. So here's a grasshopper on the side of this ponderosa tree. We're talking mainly about plant defenses, but if we zoom out, this is a pretty good example of camouflage, one of the most common animal defenses. So we've been hiking around this ponderosa forest for a few minutes, and then we came across this patch that has a lot of these pine brooms on the ground, but only around this tree. And one of our volunteers from a long time ago, who's no longer with us, Paul Stubbe, an Air Force veteran by the way, once told me that most ponderosas have a chemical compound that will make them a little bit less appetizing to things like squirrels. And certain ponderosas produce less of that compound. It's almost like a sacrificial tree to the forest. So then the squirrels will go after that tree much more than the other trees. And that's why around certain trees we find a larger number of these pine brooms, because the squirrels are attacking the trees that taste the best. Alrighty, well, thanks for joining us on yet another Sandia Mountain Natural History Center quick trip. In all honesty, lunch wasn't that bad, but a special thanks once again to all the veterans out there. I hope that you're having a peaceful and happy Veterans Day. And special thanks today to our cameraman, Toby Archuleta, United States Navy. Really appreciate all his help as well. So we'll catch you on the next one.